Hi, Ekta. Thank you so much for taking out the time and doing this short interview. Like when I approached you, you told me that you work with many materials and you wouldn't want to select one, but rather talk about the different materials you've worked with. And I was very interested in knowing how you select a material when you're designing a particular art piece or furniture, and what's your journey with it. So, can you tell me a little more about your process?
First of all, thank you for having me and thank you for having the patience because I know you've run around a lot to make this happen, but they've been trying times, I think. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. Okay, so if I have to think about the reason why I told you not one particular material and various, is that I think the ethos of the way Red works as a studio is to be experimental. So while I don't think we are innovating new materials that we use, but it's also trying to use materials which are existing in a different context. So for example, I'll give you an example. Concrete. We've been using concrete forever, and it's people cast slabs with it, you do columns with it, you do all your regular stuff with it. So when last year, I think we were approached by Stir to do an installation in the Jan of 2019. So we've been exploring 3D printing for a really long time. And I think Rajiv even went and did a course at the AA on parabolic structures and how you can print in various materials and things like that. And so 3D printing is, I think, it's a thing of the future, and with this situation that we're in, with this, we will basically have to start relying on building off-site much more and just assembling on-site, and that's something that we've sort of realized over time. So I think printing is the next way forward. We don't have a 3D printing concrete machine yet in India. It's still experimental. So we wanted to try and explore this option of doing, of course, we weren't doing a structure, we were doing some sort of an installation. So we said, okay, let's try and experiment and find if we can do a little bit, printed in concrete. Yeah. So we chased, in fact, Apurva found this place in Thailand somewhere where they said, okay, we can print these blocks for you. We were trying to print the Preamble of the Constitution, and there was a whole different take on what we were doing and stuff like that regarding that. So we reached this particular place in Thailand, and they were supposed to print out these sentences and send back to us. Of course, it was a whole nightmare in terms of execution. So I am going to tell you the downside of it. It's totally possible to do. They were ready to do it. They were ready to ship it. I think there were just issues of logistics and timings and things, which is why it didn't work out. But otherwise, just you imagine you have this nozzle which actually pours out concrete and builds exactly what you want to. And they've built castles and they've built all kinds of things all over the world. So I think that was something that we were really, really intrigued with. Of course, what we landed up doing was using HDF, cutting out the letters in it, and then using concrete which we injected into a spray mold. So we still slurried it down to make it thin and sort of sprayed it onto the surface so that it still looks and gives you the idea of concrete, and it's still stacked in layers, so it gives you the idea that it's been built. Yeah. So that's been one fun sort of experiment.
What is the one material you've enjoyed experimenting with the most, or something that you keep looking forward to, like trying on different furniture pieces or art pieces beyond concrete? Is there anything else you've experimented with?
So yes, so for the office floor, actually, we used an ardex floor, which is basically a combination of concrete and epoxy. So it has the hardness of concrete, so it doesn't have the wear and tear that you would have otherwise in like a IPS floor and things like that, which have been done in the past. So it has the hardness. At the same time, it has a layer of epoxy which sort of seals the top. So it sort of becomes impermeable. So, like normally on an IPS floor, if you walk in heels or if you have a nail popping out of your shoe and tends to scratch it, nothing literally happens to this floor. Right. So it's an industrial grade floor. You can drag stuff all over it and nothing will happen. And our studio is a prime example of that. So actually we've had a lot of fun working with it. It's a great product. I don't think we had the right installers, so we've had a lesson or two to learn from them. But otherwise, it's something that is fast setting. You just need a simple base which is level, and you just have to pour this material out, and with the trowel they sort of move. It's just very similar to how in situ floors are done. Yeah. But I just think that because it has the elasticity of the epoxy and it has the hardness of the concrete, I think it's really, really commend with. And you can actually take it up. You can take a vata, you take a curved edge. You don't have to have a skirting. You can take it up on the wall. You can take it up on the ceiling. So an entire space sort of can be done in that one material. So that was actually, and we're having tons of fun with it because it started with the studio and now we've actually gone further and done bathrooms of residences. We've done pieces of furniture, things like that.
So when
it's
you're
been fun.
choosing to work with like a new material, do you normally test it out around office or on a sample before? Or do you just go like, okay, let's just go all out and do some experiment and we'll figure it on the way? Because there are like two ways to go about it.
True. So we do try and experiment, I would say, because I don't think you can totally experiment with at your client's expense. So we do try. So our office was a great way to sort of use the floor. We learned what the plus and minus of the material was and how we can evolve and do something different. So after that, we've actually done 3 homes which has a similar floor, and each home that we've done, we've improved the spec of the floor and actually done a better job. So the color pigments have been more consistent, the hardness has been more consistent, the application method has been better. So yes, our office was a huge learning platform. The other thing is, since we have a studio which is experimental and we have the space to be able to do it, our courtyard in the office actually becomes this sort of lab almost, where we actually test all kinds of things in smaller proportions because, of course, it's not possible to lay full-size pieces of anything. But if we're experimenting with a spray, or if we're experimenting with the hardness of a material, or if we're trying to work different geometries and joinery of a wooden floor. So if you take your typical wooden floor, and then if we get it CNC out a cut differently, and see how you can experiment with putting it together, because it's not just about using the floor, but how you use it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it sounds so much fun that you guys must be learning so many new things when you're like testing in your own backyard. It's like, okay,
yeah, it's super fun.
How it's happening. So like you mentioned, right, you were going to be sourcing the concrete preamble from Thailand, but now with COVID and everybody getting very environmentally conscious, would you say that sourcing local is going to be a challenge, or do you think that we are equipped to provide what designers need, or like how can the vendors or suppliers upgrade themselves?
Yes, I know there's been a lot of talk about this, of course, about going local. And I am a huge promoter of that, in the sense that if you can get something in your backyard, why would you need to reach out? Right. But honestly, I think it's much more than that. It's really going to be about collaborations across the board. So if, say, for example, I'm wanting to do a couch which is from Italy, and for us, especially as a studio, I don't think we actually spec a particular brand because of the brand itself, but because of the technique of which it is constructed. I think we have the talent in the country for sure. I think we have the talent and we have the craftsmanship. We may not have all the hardware required, but I think if you can reach a mid-ground of finding that fine balance between craft and the ways to put it together, or the skill set, I think you'll get pretty much, everything on board and on power. One thing that we all agree on is that you have to find great talent and great craftsmanship. And that may be anywhere. So I think it's about that.
And I feel like somewhere, even for us as suppliers, we can look into technology helping us increase the speed of delivery as well, and making sure that, the same kind of samples are delivered time and time. That's another thing, like to ensure consistency.
True, absolutely.
In addition to this, there's also a lot of talk about sustainable materials, right? But not every material can really be like extremely sustainable or renewable. Some of them are just great as they are. So what is your philosophy when you're choosing materials to work with? How do you decide that, which one would you go ahead with? How important is the aesthetic versus the sustainability of the material?
Like I said, when you 3D print, and I talk about printing because I really think that this is the way forward. So you basically just fed in an algorithm, and the computer generated this sort of cutting sheet template, which was generated. And when you opened up the template, you basically had it in various layers. That single sheet would then be able to develop as a truss, or some sort of like an I-beam section. So it's about how you use that material right? Because you've taken that one sheet, and since you've generated this perfect formula for it to be cut optimally, so you're wasting minimal material and you're able to get the maximum amount of strength from it. So that helps you sort of bridge the gap between a non-sustainable material like steel, but using it economically to give you the desired structural strength. So where traditionally you would basically have welders welding things, taking thicker sections, wasting that much resource. Here you actually have it very scientifically broken down to give you the same requirement with much, much less resources used. So I think our strategy is to try and use things like that, which is why I talk about 3D printing. Like, it will reduce your cost of construction dramatically if you were to just print out your slabs and columns, because it's a calculation. There's not that much waste of sand, water, cement, all of that doesn't come into the mix. So I think that's sort of how we look at it.
All the different pieces of furniture that you guys have created, or decor pieces, has there ever been an experience where you've learned from, where in hindsight you were like, I should not have done that, but it happened, so okay, we learned from it? Anything?
Yeah, all the time.
And how do you handle that? How do you handle the crisis that it creates? Because the biggest crisis is like time, right? Money comes second, but like everyone wants things on time. That's first. So how do you handle that as
well? Honestly, it's about honesty, honestly. So it's like I said upfront, if we feel a client is ready to experiment and we've done our R&D and homework on an idea of how we're going to use this material, then it's about jumping in and asking them to keep the faith. And it's about updating them and being honest, every step of the way. So for example, this was back in the day when I did my first Alibag home and I used an IPS floor. And I had no idea how to lay this floor. And of course, we'd done experiments and stuff, and my own contractor was going to do it at that point. And he had done a few homes and I'd seen, stuff like that. And the client was experimental. Of course, it was a weekend home and everybody gets away with saying that, it's the look that works and stuff. But it was cracked, and you warn them about having cracks in the floor, having cracks in the wall, and all the bathrooms, the wall floor, everything was going to be this one material. But it cracked means there was, I think, less flooring material and more cracks. But I think the key is to tell them that, look, this is going to happen. This is my first time I'm doing it. You can choose to not do it if you don't want to, and I can go down the traditional path. But if you do jump, and if we do succeed, then we'll have created something new, which is fun and experimental, and you'll be happy with it.
So my last question was, for people who are like trying to experiment with materials, are furniture designers, or just wanting to, try out new things, what would be your principles that guide you? So if you're experimenting, are there any do's or don'ts that you keep in mind when you go about it, so that there's not as much wastage of resources?
So I think research, for sure. I think that is key. You really, really have to do your homework about what you're trying to use. And there's so much information out there. It's just about finding it and applying it, right? So in fact, just recently, we're doing a poured cast glass table. It's for the India Design Fund that Ashish was a part of. And we had to design some sort of object. And one of the things I think we were thinking of doing was doing these ceramic legs. So it's been done before, but ceramic legs and having an insertion of the artist into the legs. So having maybe these clay hands and stuff like that, mold that together. And because the base was so sculptural, what we thought of doing is actually just having a very clean top, which basically allows you to see through. And the easiest material to use is glass. But that thin sheet of glass was just not working, because the maximum thickness you'll probably get is 19 mm or something. So we actually went ahead and researched about poured glass, and it's available and people do it. We've never done it before, but there's tons of information. We're totally excited to do it. Our top is going to be around 3 inches thick, and it's going to be melted poured glass, and it will have its bubbles and it will have its irregularities, but there's tons of information there for you to understand of how to control it. And then it's about working with the right person, like coming to the right contact of who will do this for you, who's experimental enough, who has enough experience of working with glass, who will be able to put the glass and ceramic bodies together. So I think it's about really rigorous research so that you're actually saving time and money.
This has been an amazing conversation. I think really helped to understand how you experiment with materials and how you go about it. Thank you so much for taking out the time, and hope you
Thank
have a
you.
great day and a little less busy week.